Hi and welcome. I'm Mary Jo, also known as Sojo, and this is part 4 of my completed quilts trunk show, where I show about 10 quilts at a time through all of my completed quilts that I have. So let's get started with number 31. This is a quilt pattern tutorial from Missouri Star, and it was called Half and Half. It was also quilted with a paisley pantograph on the long arm. We'll flip it over and take a look at the back. So that's the back of that quilt. And you can kind of see down there in that bottom corner the paisley pantograph coming out for the quilting. Now this is number 32. Now I believe this was actually a quilt kit that I'd got at a local quilt shop, and the pattern is just those panels of those squares and some four patches put together with some borders, and it was quilted with a snowflake pantograph. I'll turn it over and we'll take a look at the back. And there's a look at those snowflakes on the back that are popping out. Now this is number 33. And this was actually some yardage that I had taken and made an attic window tutorial from Missouri Star from. And then I threw in some extra fabric. Now in that tutorial, it usually just used a panel, but I took a whole yard of fabric and made it into that. It was quilted on the long arm with a snowflake pattern. We'll flip it over and take a look at the back. And there's a look at that snowflakes from the back of the quilt. Now the rest of these quilts are quilts that have come from my son's room, or that I had made from my son when he was younger. So this first one, which is number 34, is a dinosaur rag quilt. Now this pattern actually came from an envelope pattern, like where you buy garment patterns. It was either like a McCall's or a Simplicity type pattern. I'm not sure which. But there it is. Now, we didn't use this as a quilt per se. We actually made this, and we had this on the floor in his room, kind of like a rug, for when he was younger. And this is number 35, which is just another rag quilt that I made out of squares. Square flannel. Squares of flannel. Number 36. Now this is a pattern that I had made, and the pattern was called Roll of Stamps, from the Seemingly Scrappy Quilt Book by Rebecca Silball. Now this was made using flannel fabrics, the scraps of flannel fabric that I have left over from making them pajamas. So this one was for my son, and it was quilted on my domestic machine and just a stitch and a ditch. And I believe the back is fleece, but we'll turn it over and take a look. So there's just the fleece on the back of it, and it was just quilted with a stitch and a ditch along those blocks. Now these next two, number 37 and number 38, are definitely well used and well loved. They were on my son's bunk beds, but they were made using the Real Fence pattern from Eleanor Burns. And it was just quilted with a stitch in the ditch with the fleece on the back. We'll turn it over and take a look at the back. And that's the back of 37. It was just with the fleece and no batting. And this is number 38, very similar to 37. It was also just stitched in the ditch with the fleece backing and no batting. Now I did use the same fabrics for both quilts, but they were put in different places. And that's just the back of 38. It had blue fleece on the back of it, where the other one had the gray fleece. Now this is number 39, the Pokemon quilt. And this was a free pattern, and it was by Kelly Fannin. And you can find that on kellyfanninquilts.com. And it was quilted on the long arm with a pantograph called Popcorn. And I chose it because to me it looked like clouds. But we'll flip it over and take a look at the backing. And that is the back of the quilt 39, the Pokemon quilt. I had just found some licensed Pokemon fabric and put that on the back. And this is number 40. Now this was a quilt that my son had picked out in a quilt magazine, and he went with me to the store and picked out all of those fabrics that went into this. Now that was about 8 years ago, so it's been a while. But it is quilted with just a stitch in the ditch along the blocks and then some big X's down the center of those blocks. But we'll flip it over and take a look at the back. And that is the back of the quilt. And all that quilting was done on my domestic with just a stitch in a ditch type technique. Okay, that is the end of part 4. Join me next time for part 5 when I'll show 10 more of my mini quilts. Till then, bye!